And I hope. Yeah, I do. Okay. I think we're live. Looks like we are. I usually get a notification. I'm just waiting on one to pop in.
Great.
And I think we're good. Okay, cool. Well, I'm not getting the notifications, but it looks like we're good. Okay. Oh, there we go.
Great.
Now we're good. All right. So, we'll be skipping the whole intro. I'll be doing that all later. So we'll just jump right in now.
Cool.
Okay. Today on the show, we have Tony Clark from Beverly and Company in California and also with House Haven in Tennessee. Let me tell you more about Tony. Now, Tony is a real estate agent with a background in both real estate sales and investment real estate strategy. Now, this is incredible, everyone. So please check this out. In his first 18 months as a realtor, he closed over 40 million in volume. He also realized the importance that good systems make in a real estate agent's business and has since opened up his own consulting firm dedicated to helping agents improve their systems and to scale their businesses. And he even has his own CRM that is dropping probably by the time this episode is released, it'll be available. So I want you to check out Tony in a couple of different places. First, I want you to follow him on Instagram. So follow him at tonyclark.realestate. We'll have a link to that in the show notes. And I also really want you to check out his new CRM, and we're going to find out more about that today as well, which is realtyflow.io. Again, realtyflow.io. Link to that will also be in the show notes. Tony, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to talk to you. I rarely it's funny, I've been doing this show for 5 or 6 years now, and I always feel like I've seen and heard it all from our guests who are all superstars in the industry, but rarely do I get to talk to a rookie superstar. And not only did you close 40 million in your first year and a half, which is insane, obviously, but you also are like practicing now in 2 states and 2 markets, which is even more incredible. I know you're mostly in California, but you also practice in Tennessee, Nashville as well. So let's start at the very beginning, which is not much that long ago, but I'd love to know how you got into real estate and why.
Yeah, I jumped into real estate actually from the investment space. I worked at a private equity firm that did residential real estate. Just kind of wanted to learn the ropes. I was all the way back when I was a kid. I was that kid trying to sell baseball cards to his friends, or try to,
Sure,
I flipped golf clubs in high school. Just the stereotypical business-minded kid. And I
sure.
always say houses are just bigger toys than the stuff that we sell growing up. But yeah, so started at a private equity fund, kind of learning the investment side. They were based out of California, but bought in different markets in the Southeast. And so I was essentially acting as a real estate agent for them, but just sourcing properties for them and running deal analysis, and really got a lot of good experience there, but realized pretty quickly that basically what I was doing for them was being a real estate agent who could only have one client. And so I wound up transitioning from the fund to getting my license, and actually wound up moving to Tennessee with my wife after I got licensed, so that we could start, investing ourselves and build a clientele there, which was where I was really focused on when I was at the private equity fund.
Wow. So were there lessons that you learned working in PE private equity that you were able to bring into the individual sort of realtor practice?
Absolutely. I think the big thing that I learned from private equity is whether you're buying one house or 1,000, it all comes down to the numbers. At least when you're looking at investment real estate, that when you're looking at a deal or looking at a market, it's all about understanding one, the risks that come with investing in that market, and then also what your numbers look like. Where at the end of the day, if it works on the spreadsheet and you've accounted for the risks, that you have a much better chance of that property being a good asset or a good buy. And that translates to then working with individuals, where it again doesn't matter if it's a big fund or someone looking to buy their first property. You can just get down to the numbers, and the end of the day, it is a big financial decision that they're making.
Since I so rarely get to talk to anyone with your background, I just have a quick question. And again, I know you're still
Yeah.
newer to this industry, but you have this unique perspective. Was it any surprise to you to see the iBuyers start to fade away?
Yeah.
You talked about numbers, right? It's all about the numbers, and
Hmm.
we're seeing companies that really should have those numbers locked in pretty well. And I'm not here to disparage companies like Zillow, etc.
Yeah.
Like I love Zillow, but
Hmm.
even they got it wrong, right? So
Hmm.
it's
Yeah.
interesting. What do you think's going on the iBuyer side?
Yeah, it's one of those things that's so the model that the iBuyers use is so tough to do at scale. It was really
Yeah,
the PE fund that I was at was trying to do 1 to 4 unit residential properties at scale, and they were a small fund with, a few hundred houses, and I couldn't imagine a fund bigger than them doing what they're doing. You have to manage
yeah,
so many people and so many contractors and keep so many things straight that even if you have multiple levels of management, it's just tough to get that right, and especially when you're buying with such tight margins, which is what we would see them doing. I know I brought a couple of properties to those iBuyers, didn't do a lot of work with them, but even the prices that they had to pay for the properties in order to win them and then try to sell them for higher,
like
it's
were
a
you
tough
able to look at
business.
those
Yeah.
and say like they're overpaying? This is crazy.
Oh yeah. Oh, they were I was like, either they're, much smarter than me because I haven't
They
been
know
around
something
that
I
long,
don't.
or something isn't adding up, and I'm not gonna say I'm smart enough to go pay more than they are for this house, so I'm just gonna let it be.
Well, turns out they were wrong. So good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but let's. So our that's, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get us off track, but I figured I got Tony. He
Yeah.
knows the private equity world. I was like,
Mhm.
what's going on with all these iBuyers? But let's get to the real meat of this, because the really impressive thing you did in the first 18 months is close 40 million in production, and that puts you in the top 0.1% of new realtors in the whole country. I mean, probably even more than the top 10, 0.1%. So you are at this very elite level. I don't think success happens by accident. Maybe unless you had a friend who had a $40 million property that we
Yeah.
sold. It was a one
Then
transaction.
just out
Then
on
I
the
would
beach
say,
the rest of the
and
year.
even that, I want to hear that story too. But I don't think that was
Yeah.
what happened. So how did
Mhm.
you do it? Every one of our listeners and viewers is like they're dripping with jealousy, just like I am. How did you do it? And what might you suggest to agents who want to duplicate that sort of success?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was really a mix of a few things. And the first was, I did get very lucky with both the timing and the market that I was in. So, there were some things that I did, and I'll talk about that, but starting with, getting into real estate right during the COVID boom, and then being in Nashville, Tennessee, which is one of the more talked about investment markets, definitely were some tailwinds that helped. So, but then within that, I know when I first got my license, I had a mentor who kind of told me, he said, "Hey, it's the first thing you need to do is find a niche." And for me, I'd kind of thought that, investment real estate made sense, but also it was like, who's going to listen to a kid in their mid 20s tell them about investment properties? So it was this kind of double
Apparently, a
edged
lot of
sword.
people.
That's yeah, and so I really that mentor was really pushing me on that, and I said, okay, I'm not going to do any marketing to first time home buyers. I'm not going to do any marketing for luxury real estate. I'm just going to focus on this for 6 months and we'll see how it goes. And it was definitely slow getting started. Those first few months, you just kind of bumble around and try things that don't work and try some things that work. And I think at least when I was first starting out, it was niching down and saying, I'm just going to focus on investors. And even within that, saying, I'm looking for a very specific type of investor. And I think this can go for any real estate agent who, even if investors isn't your niche, but let's say it's first time home buyers. For me, I said, I'm looking for investors who need loans on the property, where they're not the flippers that are paying all cash and going to go flip 50 houses. I don't want to go write a bunch of offers for them and get rejected. I'm looking for an investor who has enough money for a down payment and is looking for a rental that's just going to give them monthly income. There's a lot more of those out there, and there's less. It's kind of this sweet spot where there haven't been as many realtors, at least that I saw in Nashville, who focused on that. And so once I identified that niche, then it was just asking the question, well, okay, where are they at? Where can I find them? And then turned into a lot of just let's go to real estate meetups, and let's go. Bigger Pockets was a big
Oh,
source. Like, let's go
sure.
find those people, essentially.
I'm going to pause you for a second because I want for
Yeah.
anyone who is listening who is a little bit lost on like what Tony's talking about. So, his niche was he wants to work with investors. He wants buy and hold investors who need loans, right? So we've now identified his niche. Now, you might be thinking, well, where does Tony find these people who, and there are places to find it. But my question is actually going to be a different question, Tony, is, is it it's been my experience talking to other investors and
Mhm.
people in this industry who do what you do that finding the investors is actually the easy part. My suspicion is finding the
Mm.
deal is step number one. In other words, finding those
Mhm.
opportunities to then present to versus, now traditional primary residence home buyers are they can look on Zillow, they can look on Redfin. The
Yep.
agent isn't always the one that finds the property. The
Mhm.
the buyer or is usually finding the property and bringing it to the realtor. I want to go see that place. Now, for on the investor side, I'm guessing it's you finding the deal and then you saying, "Here's a cash flow opportunity," and then going to
Mhm.
your pool of investors. By the way, for anyone who isn't familiar with Bigger Pockets, it is the largest online forum for real estate investors in the country. It is by far the top of the mountain. If you ever really want to get a good education and understand how investors think and talk to each other, it's basically like Reddit for investors. That's what it is. It's where you can. It's a social component. I've had the Bigger Pockets guys on my show before. I love those guys. They're just awesome. And it is a great place to learn how to talk to investors. But anyway, was I right about that? That finding the opportunity is really the hard part, and finding the money and the investors is the easy part.
Absolutely. I think that's the first step, being finding the investors. As far as, if you find a great deal but nobody can buy it, then you're kind of out of luck. But that's definitely the easy part. And I think then going and finding the deal comes down to, even first, I think, understanding who you're working with on the investor side and what they're looking for. That was something that I learned from the private equity fund that I took into real estate. Was, let me sit down with this investor and work through exactly what they're looking for in a property. And without getting too technical on the investment side, basically saying, here is either the return that you're looking for, or what kind of neighborhood are you looking for, as far as how quickly it's growing versus how stable, or whatnot. Let's sit down and figure out what you're looking for, and then go find properties that fit that box. It's the same thing when I work with, because I will take clients on who are looking to buy their first home, or friends and family. And it's the same thing as, I could love a house that we go see, but if it's not the kind of house that they're looking for, I just wasted both of our time. And so to
Sure.
really get narrowed down on their criteria, that then gives me a better feel for going out and finding those properties, so that when I present it to them, I, one, know how to present it, and say, look, this is what fits your goals. And also I can kind of weed out a lot of the properties that don't. So it kind of winds up being an easier way to search.
So basically, you meet with an investor. You say, okay,
Hmm.
what are you looking for? In other words, is there an annualized rate of
Hmm.
return that you'd like to have?
Yep.
Is the K1 for tax deduction the most important
Hmm.
thing? Is it the income? Is it the appreciation? So Tony walks his or doesn't walk people through. He finds out exactly what his investors want and need, and then he says, "Okay, I get it. I know what you want. Now my job is to go find these properties." So here's question number two. So now you've identified the needs of the client, and now
Hmm.
it's okay. Now you got to find the hard part, the property. Where are you finding the properties? What percentage of the time are the
Mm.
properties on the MLS, and what percentage of the time are you doing creative ways to find things that are not
Yeah.
available on the MLS?
Yeah, I would say it shifted even within the past couple of years. It's definitely shifted, where early on it was more off market. I would go just try to network with people. So I'd go to not necessarily real estate agent events, but real estate investor events or business networking groups, and just ask everyone I knew. I'd say, "Hey, I've got somebody who's looking for XYZ type of property. Do you know of anybody?" And then I'd put them into my follow-up system and just follow up with them saying, "I've got a buyer looking for this. Do you have anything?" And same thing with wholesalers. I would go find wholesalers or investors and say, "Do you have anything coming up? Keep me on your list." And it was really just finding the people who were out there hunting for deals daily, and then keeping in touch with them. And that I think was
Got it.
key for finding those properties.
So you weren't sending all these mailers to these multifamily buildings or whatever, saying, "Hey, I want to buy your property," which some people do and have success with
Hmm.
that. You can go
Yeah.
knock on doors. There are ways to find properties that
Hmm.
aren't listed at all, but
Hmm.
that are, mom and pop may, owns a
Yeah.
multifamily, and there's a million different ways, and
Hmm.
there are much better podcasts than this, specifically for how to creatively find those properties. We're not real estate investing podcast per se, but I was curious. But you do sometimes find them on the MLS as well, I'm guessing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was probably, I'd say close to 50-50, where the MLS was a lot more of what you were talking about. If they were looking for just a property to park money in, or some, a few new builds that were going to be nice corporate rentals, or, you find properties on the MLS. But I'd always just tell my clients, I'd say, hey, I'll set you up. I said, I have a 3-step process where I will set you up on the auto search for properties. And this, I think, works with any client, where I'd say, I'll set you up on the auto search. So if I'm away from my office for whatever reason, you get the properties and you don't have to rely on me seeing them. I'll also CC myself on the auto search in that step too. And I go through that once a day. So if there's something that really jumps out to me, then I'll reach out to you directly as well. So it can be, there's two-way conversation. You know that I'm actively looking for you. And then 3 is the off-market properties, and that's, I'll really be personally reaching out to you on those. But I think that helped me win a lot of clients initially, where they said, "Oh, he's going to do more than just set me up on an auto search and wait for me to respond," and just kind of
Right.
earn some trust early on.
And how important is it to be active in these online forums like Bigger Pockets so that you can get access to this huge network of people who want to invest and also learn? I mean, I tell everyone, if you want
Hmm.
the best education about how to add, the service of being able to support clients who want real estate investment, advice, and want those kind of deals, Bigger Pockets is, I can't think of a better place to go than that. But how important is that for the education and also the networking?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's big. If people, it's just reaching out and letting people know that you're there to add value. I think that's the big thing. Is if you're there to learn and to add value, that networking is big, because everybody can kind of see through if you show up with the business card to the networking event and say, "Hey, call me if you're going to buy sell a property," and they'll add your card to the list of 20 other people.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
if you're there and you're either very interested in learning about their experience, and that's where I see real estate agents and lenders and people who do that really well. They're there to learn, and then they're there to add value of, even if it's just one tidbit. And I learned this from one of my mentors. He's like, hey, find one thing about your market that most real estate agents don't know. And you can just throw that into your first conversation. Of Nashville, it was within the Nashville metro, there were 2 different tax districts, and one you paid about half the property taxes you did in the other. And I would just throw
Oh,
that into my first conversation, where
I would
nobody
like
would
to know
think
that if
to
I
look
was
at
moving
that.
to Nashville. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd say, hey, here's, it's the Briley Loop, the freeway. If essentially, if you're inside that, your property taxes are going to be almost twice what they will if you're outside. And all of a sudden, you've added value and built trust. But you can only do that if you get in front of people, either networking online or in person. And so I think that's huge. I think that's a big, big value add.
Yeah, again, you've really only been practicing as a realtor for a short amount of time. What percentage of agents do you think have your particular skill set, with respect to, a real estate investment? Like, I'm just going to throw a number I'm completely making out of whole cloth. I'm going to say less than 3% of realtors probably focus in the market that you're in, or focus in real estate investing. Would that be roughly fair?
Yeah, that's a question that honestly I haven't been around enough or in enough markets to see. In Nashville, I will say, so now being in Nashville and in California, that percentage was much higher in
Yeah.
Nashville. I think just because there's so
Because
much more
Nashville was
investing activity
exploding.
there.
Yeah.
That's, yeah, but it's still low. I mean, it's still, I think, that 3 to 5% there, and then probably, 1% or less that really focus on real estate in California or on investing,
Investing.
where I
Yeah.
am in California.
It's such a nice additional avenue to add. So, and again, you can't be all things to all people. You're like, hey, I'm not a luxury guy.
Mhm.
I'm not a first time home buyer
Yeah.
guy. I mean, you could be, and you could get
Mhm.
your way through those deals, obviously,
Yeah.
but it's not your main focus. But
Mhm.
it's a nice thing. If it was me and I guess it's all about what you're into. Like you came from that world. You
Mhm.
came from the PE world.
Yeah.
It's what you're into. You're a numbers guy. You're a systems guy. And
Mhm.
let's switch to systems because that is, anyone can grind out, not anyone, but a lot of times people think, well,
Mhm.
Tony did 40 million in 18 months. In his first 18 months, he must have just grinded it out. And you probably did. But I'm curious to know what systems helped make that a
Mm.
little bit easier for you because I imagine you were working pretty long hours to get to those numbers.
That's yeah, it was really, definitely trying to figure out how to take what I was doing. My motto as far as growing and scaling is I say, okay, let's work really hard, and then let's figure out how to simplify what I'm doing so that I can
Right.
scale bigger, and then work really hard, simplify, scale. Like that's kind of how I think about it. And so the first few months that I was in the business, it was let's just call everyone I can on my cell phone or go through Facebook or keep a Google sheet, and then realize that's not sustainable for anything. And so then started using a CRM and really keeping track of my contacts and trying to set tasks for myself to follow up with people and trying to, still make it personal because we've all seen the automated emails where that you're on a mailing list and it sounds like a mailing list and you burn trust that way. So I said, well, I don't want to do that, but let's figure out how to keep in touch with my clients and really just organize my database because like you were talking about with oh go ahead.
No, I
Yeah.
didn't mean to interrupt your flow. I'm super
Yeah.
excited to hear about what
Mhm.
systems you built to do this.
Yeah. Yeah, so it was really, the first one was my database, and at first I used the CRM that was provided from my brokerage, and then tried a couple others, but it was really more the functions of I would anybody who went into my database or anyone I met went into my database. I'll start there, and then I tagged them as whether they were a buyer, seller, vendor, friend, whoever, and then they'd get added to a couple of things where one, I just had a newsletter that I pushed out and it wasn't anything groundbreaking. I didn't spend a lot of time on it, but it was just, hey, I'm in the market. Here's a little tidbit to add value. And then from there, I always knew, you know, one, I would be able to fish kind of with that newsletter. And then anyone who was active, I really kept track of where they were in the process and what they were expecting from me. If I had active clients, I would know that, hey, I'm going to call them every couple of days or every day or, whatnot. And then anybody who was still a new lead, I'd push them through. I did have a few automated campaigns and templates and things I'd use for new leads. And it was really, I, I would just develop those based off of if I did something once, I'd say, let's figure out a way to simplify this the next time. So let's put an automation or a task in, and then let's figure out how to do 100 times more work with that same system without it breaking.
So you'd meet with a client and you'd get a sense of
Hmm.
what their expectations are of you, and you would identify those and
Hmm.
probably arrive at some sort of agreement, like or whether it's verbal or just internal.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, I know what I need to do for this client, which means I'm
Hmm.
going to call them either every day, every other day, every 3 days. You made that determination. Of course, every client could be different, and you make that determination, and then you set up the repeating tasks so that you don't forget again, this sounds so basic. However, the basics or the fundamentals are usually
Hmm.
what win the game. And so, as silly as it is to go, remember every 3 days in your calendar, you have to call so and so. It's funny. I've told this story before, and I apologize for our audience that has heard it ad nauseum. But I talked to one of the top agents in Chicago here many years ago, and I said, "What do you think?" It literally out of 46,000 agents, she's number one. And I was like, "How did you? What? Why are you number one? And what did you do different?" She goes, "DJ, I call every one of my clients every week." And I go, and
Wow.
she's like, well, the active clients, right? And she goes,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, active clients. And I said, and like, yeah, so, not so, but kind of, I was expecting a
Yeah.
bigger. And she goes,
Yeah.
well, obviously there's a million other things she does,
Mhm.
but she goes, that's my secret sauce. And I was like,
Yeah.
it's that. And she goes, I know it sounds really silly, right? And she goes, that's it. She goes, you'd be shocked. Most
Hmm.
agents don't. They're afraid to call their clients unless it's good news.
Yeah.
So curious to get your thoughts. Like when you know you have to call them every couple of days, do you already know? I mean, unless it's like new news that you have to
Hmm.
prevent to them, do you know sort of what you're going
Yeah.
to say? Yeah,
Yeah, typically it'll be, and whether it's a, I say call, sometimes it would be a text. I'd use the
sure,
word communicate of,
yeah,
eh, eh, get in touch with them to stay top of mind. And yeah, when there was no news, it would really just be usually just a quick text of saying, "Hey, just wanted to check in with you. Nothing new on the market today, or nothing new I've seen, but wanted to let you know I'm looking." And
perfect.
that was it. They know that I'm looking for them, but there was nothing there. Not I dropped off the face of the earth because they haven't heard from me in 2 days, and they're checking Zillow for 3 hours a day and feeling
Right.
like their agent isn't there with them.
Yeah, the number one reason people fire their agent is shocking, not shockingly, communication.
Hmm.
It's consistency,
Yeah.
communication. So okay, so you now have these systems in place where,
Hmm.
with respect to communication. What other? Tell me about how you begin to develop your systems so that, because again, that isn't necessarily super easy to
Hmm.
scale, right? Because you have a certain number of
Yeah.
clients, you have a certain number of phone calls or texts or emails you
Hmm.
can make in a day. So how do you sort of keep it all organized?
Yeah. So what I started to do with the systems is, as I kept scaling, I said, okay, I need to push a system until it breaks. Where, like you said, the tasks. I let me just call everyone until I can't call everyone anymore, and then let's step it up. And so, within my niche, what I wound up doing is I started tracking where I would lose clients, and I
Oh,
started to
interesting.
see, like, okay, I'm getting X amount of leads in from, and you mentioned Bigger Pockets. I bought Bigger Pockets leads for a long
Yep,
time, and they were a
sure.
great lead source where
Mhm.
they would come in, and I had an automated workflow. It would come into my CRM. I'd hit them with an intro email that had a video in it saying, here's a little bit about the market. I'd love to book a call with you. Here's my calendar invite. And then I just had an automated email and text that would go out every day to them, just if until they booked a meeting. And
Sure.
so that, as one example, I realized that came out of me realizing that I was losing a lot of leads that came in because even though I felt like I was reaching out to them quickly within, 15, 30 minutes, it wasn't instantaneous and somebody else was. And
Isn't that amazing? Yeah. That's
yeah,
like 15 to 30 minutes. It's almost like it
that's
happened a century
wild.
ago. Yeah.
Yeah, because by that point they're done looking at properties and they're moving on to their next thing. And if somebody calls them right when they're looking, it's, when if I need my lawn mowed and I go call one lawn care company and they don't pick up, I'm just going to move on and call the
Of
next one. And it's ridiculous when you're looking at it from the other side of things. Of we have
yeah.
such short attention spans, but it's such a big thing. So, but yeah, I would track really, that being one example. I would track where I was losing leads and then try to figure out a way to plug that hole on, if it was okay, new leads are coming in and I'm converting them at 20% and I should be at 30, or I think I can get to 30. Let me go analyze that part of my business and make it better. And this is where I'm just a data and numbers nerd on that side of
Yeah.
things. And so I'd look at that, or then I'd look at my pipeline and say, okay, I'm getting a lot of good clients in, but then I'm not, I'm losing them once they become clients, and I should be converting higher here. Okay, that's because I'm not finding good deals for them. Let me go find more ways to find them properties. Or under contract, am I not doing a good job of communicating with lenders or inspectors or getting bids from contractors? There's different factors at each stage of the client
Sure.
journey, or after they bought a property, how much repeat business am I getting? And if it's low, how can I follow up with them better? So there's these. I kind of developed 5 different stages where I could be losing clients, and then I just try to optimize each one of those and make those better. So it's all basic
Incredible.
stuff, but it's just putting a framework in to think through it.
Well, push-ups are basic too, and they're also super
That's
important,
yeah,
right? So, and
yeah,
I mean that with the highest
yeah.
possible compliment, because it's always these fundamentals. And just as you were telling me, I'm thinking about, I'm a recruiter, or I basically recruit realtors. So I could I was trying to apply this to my own systems of like, where do I lose recruits? Like, why do they end up
Mm,
choosing other firms,
yeah.
and where in my process? But because I think that comes from that private equity large scale size. Even though you were at a
Hmm.
smaller firm or at a smaller fund, you still were managing hundreds of houses, and so this idea of scalability is obviously important. So you have to look for those weak points, and this idea of doing an audit in your communication
Hmm.
chain, in your or just in your sales pipeline, and looking at your
Yeah.
5 stages, identifying those weak points and plugging those holes, as you said. Boy, I'm loving that. And you're a numbers guy, so you're a metrics person. So everything
Hmm.
is benchmarked and metriced, and we know if we're above the line or below the line. If we're below, and what's really cool about real estate stuff is there's a lot of data out there that you can
Hmm.
use to say what is the on a Bigger Pockets lead or a Zillow lead or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
The average close rate is this. I want to get to X. So a lot of this data is already there for you to benchmark against, and it just helps you become super efficient, I imagine.
Hmm. Absolutely. And I think it's something that had not everybody in real estate, but I feel like most of us are pretty competitive too. And so if you can use data to say, oh, here's where the average is, or here's where the top tier are, I'm sitting, below that. Oh, what's it going to take for me to get there, for me to get to the next level? And I think it's a good mesh of being able to use those data points to push yourself to be better.
Yeah, I mean, I would even encourage all of our listeners or viewers, if there's someone in your local market who's a realtor that you admire that has like a very, some really impressive numbers, whether it's production, whether it's days on market, whether it's,
Mm,
percentage over list price, whatever the metric is that you're like, how do they do that? Literally call them and be like, I am so enamored with the way that you do X, Y, or Z. I'm your biggest fan. I noticed you do all these things. Could I grab 15 minutes of your day? I'll
mm,
buy you coffee or lunch or whatever. I promise you that will be, call 5 of those people. One of those people, if not all 5, will take that 15 minutes. And have you ever done that? Where are you reaching out to other mentor? You said you have mentors, so
yeah, absolutely. I think that's something that either both within my market in Nashville, I did that a few times, and then even outside of the market, I'd find somebody who was out in Ohio or Pennsylvania where they're
love
just
it.
crushing it in their market. But I'd say, hey, one big fan, would love to and in investment real estate, it was the hey, I can add value. I would love to push people your way if they're not a fit for Nashville, like the numbers look good in your market or whatever. Would love to pick your brain for 15 minutes. Or, usually instead of pick your brain, I don't like that saying as much
Yeah, it's like
of
who cares? Yeah,
just,
yeah.
hey, I've got these 3 questions, or here's the one thing I'm struggling with. Would you
Yes,
mind sharing what you do here? Because I see you doing it really well. And that's an
awesome.
easy answer for them. They don't have to think through, oh, what's he going to ask? It's no, here's the question. Here's where they
Right.
can add value, and they're happy to give a
And
few
it's
minutes.
super flattering to ask someone for their advice. It is what
Mhm.
you we think maybe, oh, we'll be annoying those people, we'll be bothering them. Maybe you will, but good chance you won't be, because they're going to be so
Mhm.
flattered that you've recognized something in their process that probably most people don't recognize. They just see them as successful,
Yeah.
and you're like, hey, I noticed you do this one
Mhm.
thing. Like you said, I'm such a fan of
Yeah.
that. I would love to learn how you do that, and maybe I can add value to you and help you,
Mhm.
and et cetera. It's all about those connections and those. You almost have to be a fan of other agents. I
Yeah.
think I have
Yeah.
learned that after almost 500 episodes, the top agents
Mhm.
that I've had on the show, they're always like so happy to they get excited about other
Mhm.
agents,
Yeah.
because they're like, oh, there's this other guy that does this really cool thing,
Mhm.
and so I think that's part of it too. But knowing your numbers, right? We'll go back
Mhm.
to systems. You got to know your numbers. You got to spend the time every single day studying your local market, studying your niche. You got to know the numbers. And most agents, the good news is most agents really don't know their numbers, if we're being
Mhm.
honest. So for the people
Yeah.
that do spend that time and really niche down and figure out where
Mhm.
they 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 blossom and bloom, and it's so impressive, because most
Mhm.
agents aren't going to spend that time doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so I think if that's you, and either if you're numbers driven or even if you're not, but you're able to take a little bit of time and run through it, you have such a leg up on the competition, or you'll at least. And I'd love to hear your take on this too. I think that's how you can build a sustainable business. You're never chasing the next client. Then you say, here's my marketing budget for this month, or here's how many people I need to cold call, or if I do this, then this will happen within reason. Markets can change and shift, but
Sure.
you're never. I would think you'll be less stressed on when's the next deal coming in, because you're focused on those things that you can control to make that next deal happen.
Totally. And all that we can ever really control is our thoughts and actions, right? So it's like
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
all we can control. And the good news is we can control it mostly. Um, but I want to talk about Realty Flow. This is your CRM because you are a systems guy and you were looking for
Mhm,
a CRM solution for your particular niche. And you were like, I you couldn't really find one that was a perfect fit. You're like, I'm going to build one.
mhm.
So, and by the way, many people have attempted this. This is not,
Yeah.
this is a tough, tough business, but
Mhm.
I want to, if I was going to, I would be looking at a CRM from a guy who did 40 million in his first 18 months. That seems like a guy I'd want to follow. Um, so tell us about Realty Flow and what you're looking to do with that.
Yeah, it really so Realty Flow came out of essentially came out of the consulting firm that I've been running for the last few months. On basically, I've been going in and exactly what we just talked through with other real estate agents, saying, "Hey, I'll come in, I'll help you audit your numbers, I'll help you look at what systems you're using, and let's figure out ways to streamline your business and kind of come in and do that." And I went through that a few times with agents and realized that there were some similarities between really agents at different productivity levels. The top tier agents usually had their systems pretty dialed. A lot of newer agents, their systems were like giving a Ferrari to a 15-year-old who hasn't learned how to drive yet.
Right.
You get these big CRMs that can do a million different things, but really you just need a way to manage your contacts, track deals, manage tasks, which that was the one weird one that most CRMs don't have just like a Google Tasks kind of thing where you can
Yeah.
just put sticky notes in. It all has to be assigned to contacts and whatever. And then just do, basic automated texting and emailing and then tracking those things. And so from that, I was able to link up with a couple of business partners that I'd worked with one before, and one is a developer, software developer in the Netherlands, and they just finished another project, and they were like, "Hey, Tony, what are you working on?" And it just kind of meshed where we decided we were going to launch a real estate CRM, really with the same motto or mantra that I've been using for my business on just this is designed to simplify your business so that you can scale, and so that you can then go work hard on your business and then simplify it through the system and then scale. And so it's not meant to be anything groundbreaking other than just here is a clean, simple way to look at everything in your business instead of a convoluted dashboard with 1,000 different things going on that you have to sift through. So,
I I think what a lot of times CRMs are, they're built by developers, and developers aren't necessarily real estate agents. Sometimes they are,
mhm,
sometimes they're not. Mostly they're
yeah.
not. And so I think sometimes CRM companies, tech companies, get some of the tools a little bit wrong, only in the sense of
Mhm,
understanding that providing all of these different features, functionality is great, but what it can result in for especially a newer agent is a lot of anxiety. So they get this, like you said, they
mhm,
get their CRM, which is fully featured, has all these amazing
yeah.
tools, and yet it becomes overwhelming because there's so
Mhm,
much. It's basically a blank canvas with all these different all this different paint, all a million different
yeah.
paint colors, and it's like, oh, what do I do? So you're looking to sort of simplify the process, streamline it, make it really accessible to agents, so that they can plug in and scale up.
Exactly, and I think just designing it, you hit it right on the head, designing something that's for real estate agents, because a lot of these big companies, it's a CRM that works really well for an enterprise Fortune 500 company with 5 levels of management.
Sure.
It needs to do a lot more than a real estate agent or even a brokerage or a team where you're tracking very specific things. And it's really just saying, let's remove all the stuff that would work well for other industries, but that you don't need in real estate, and then do the things that you need in real estate really, really well. And then let's bring in some fun stuff. Like we pulled in Chat GPT so you can write listing descriptions and some other things. We just, you know, pulled that in so that you can do all of that from the CRM. But it's really like let's do the essentials really really well and get rid of the fluff.
Yeah, yeah, the fundamentals. Let's
Mhm.
keep the machine oiled and running.
Yeah.
I love it. So I would encourage everyone to check out realtyflow.io. Check out you can do demos there. You can see the CRM in action, and hopefully maybe become a client. So check out realtyflow.io. Also, I want everybody to follow Tony at on Instagram, tonyclark.realestate. We have links to both of those in our show notes. Tony, one last question. Now, you've had a tremendous amount of success in the last 18 months, which again, it's like blowing me away, your success. And by the way, hugely jealous of you. So amazing, amazing success there. Jealousy in the most positive way. What were give us one mistake that you made, or something that you're struggling with right now, just so that we know you're human. We know that you have
Yeah,
your own
so
struggles. And
oh, how much time do we have? I'll give you a list. That's yeah, I think the if I were to think back, kind of the number one mistake that I make over and over is I try to do too much instead of leveraging uh, either leveraging basically anything, leveraging other people's time or abilities or knowledge or software or all of these different things. I think the big mistake is I fall into the trap of, oh, if I want it done right, I need to do it myself. And I think
right,
everything from I don't need to go to every showing. I can have a showing agent do it, or I don't need to, pretend like I know stuff that I don't. Let's go call a mentor, or let's, employ other people on my team and train them so that they can go do things better than I could on my own. I think that's the thing that I struggle with the most. And so it's not even a mistake that I made one time. It's something I'm still working through on. I try to hold on to things longer than I should instead of delegating them and putting them into the hands of people who can do them better than me.
my boss has always said, if you delegate something, assume, and again, this is not like written in stone, but this is his philosophy. Assume that the person you delegate the task to will do it to about 70 to 80%
Mm,
of what you would do. So it's not going to be perfect. It's going to be 70 to 80% perfect, and then maybe
yeah,
you come in and tweak the little last 20-30% of it. But even that would be pretty helpful, right? So like, even if they
yeah,
don't quite get it to the Tony Clark perfection level, they can get you at 70, three quarters of the way there, and
hmm
then you just run the ball into the end zone. um that's a pretty good deal, but it's hard because you do have to accept less than perfect work.
hmm
Because Tony, you have very specific standards, high standards for whatever task you may be delegating to somebody, and you have very specific rules and structure. But you do have to sort of accept a slightly less than for delegation, and that to me has always been the hardest part. I'm curious if you
hmm
struggle with that as well.
Oh, absolutely. And I'd say it's even a pendulum where I struggle with either letting go too much or not letting go enough. Where if I hire somebody to do something, I've got a virtual assistant who he's awesome. He's been working for me for about a year and a half now. And when I keep going back and forth with him, even still, where I'll micromanage too much, and then I'll let the reins out too much, as far as I don't give him enough direction. Not like I let him slack off or whatever. It's just, hey, here's a task, go do this, and he's like, well, Tony, what? How do I do this? Or what? Give me more direction. And it's really finding that balance of saying, okay, here and a new skill set also of managing people that's very different than doing things yourself, and I'm still very much learning that, but I think that's right on where 70-80% there's the expectation, and then you figure out how to encourage and uplift and keep accountable anybody who is working for you.
Yeah. It's really an impressive thing. And we are in a global economy. So for anyone out there who is thinking, I can't afford an assistant, you might be able to afford an assistant in your local market, but you might be able to afford an assistant from another country, another part of the world, who where the economics are different, where the cost of living is different, and we can get virtual assistants who will only want a certain amount of pay that you might be able to afford. So if you are struggling, Upwork is a great website to find
Hmm.
talent. Globally to help you with whatever you're struggling with. And if you're not a numbers guy, hire a numbers guy. You can find them all over the world. And if you're, need help in any other way, obviously Tony's leveraging that. And he's saying the same thing that all of us struggle with is we want to do everything ourselves because we have a vision for exactly how things should look, feel, and sound. But having some people help you, and you can get help from all over the world now. We're so fortunate. So I want everyone who's listening to please. Oh, one more thing. I'm sorry, before I'm interrupting myself, but for anyone out there who is a realtor in the Nashville area in particular, any Tennessee realtors, um, I want you to check out Tony's brokerage, which is a House Haven in Tennessee. They're an amazing company. Tony was telling me offline about, I was say, Tony, you're amazing, 40 million in your first year and a half. And he's like, oh, I'll introduce you to my managing broker. He's a total superstar. So if you are an agent in that market and you're like, I'm not getting the tools, the training, the support that I need from my existing firm, I'd want to go work at a firm where a guy just knocked out 40 million in a year and a half. Like that's a pretty cool place to me. I bet they have a few nuggets of wisdom over there, House Haven. So definitely reach out to Tony. You can find him on Instagram, TonyClark.realestate. Also, check out his CRM, realtyflow.io. And Tony also practices in Ventura, all over the LA area. He is with Beverly and Company out there as well. So if you ever wanted to team up with him out in California as well, he would reach out. And remember too, Tony does deals all over the country. So he needs realtor partners. So he has investors that are looking for properties everywhere. So maybe you might have a client that is looking for a deal that Tony can put together in another state, another market. So if you're a realtor and you just want to network with Tony and sort of trade deals back and forth, happens all the time. Reach out to him, find him on Instagram, check out his CRM as well. And Tony, on behalf of our audience, this has been such a fun conversation with you. We had a record number of people watching live, which is amazing. So I'm so excited for that. So on behalf of everyone, the collective audience, thank you. We appreciate you. On behalf of Tony and myself, we also want to thank the audience for making it all the way to the end of the episode. Please, we ask that you do just one thing to help us. Tell a friend. Think of one other realtor that you know that is struggling. I mean, it's 2023. This is a tough year for realtors. Let's be honest. Let's make it a little bit easier for them. Send them a link to this episode so that they can learn from Tony, and they can have a $40 million next year and a half, just like our friend Tony. Tony, thank you so much. You're amazing. I'm excited. We'll have you back on the show as you continue to scale, because 40 million is your bottom now. So I'm excited to see where you're headed. You'll probably be $1 billion producer in 10 years or so. So I'm excited to continue to watch your ascension. But keep us in the loop, and we will see everybody on the next episode. Thanks, Tony.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. Thanks for listening, and really appreciate the invite.